Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strategic Management. Thank you for joining the web conference today. I hope you all have had a good start to the week. I hope you have had um, a good break from our hybrid session. So I would like to, again, welcome you back. And this session, we're going to be doing corporate strategy. But before we get started, excuse me, as usual, I would like to know if anyone has any questions, any housekeeping questions that I can answer at all. Okay, no questions that I can see. All right. I wanted to also go over the grading scale. I wanted to make sure that you had some visibility to this. And the presentation schedule is not completely done yet, so that will be coming up, fairly soon once I get everything approved. And then we will be talking about corporate strategy and the House of Tata case discussion. Okay, so for your case study feedback, this is the scale which will translate the point value to a letter grade. And this is also the scale that I will be using to in terms of doing your final grades as well. So you can use this as a guideline for your information. And if anybody has any questions on this, please do let me know. And I wanted to share this with you. This is a follow-up from our Starbucks discussion. And this is the Starbucks in Seoul, Korea. So you see that Starbucks has become a very, very international concern. They are featured in this really interesting building in Seoul. And it's quite the thing here. So perhaps some of you have been there. I have not. I got this from a colleague who was there and knew that I use the Starbucks case in the course, so he was able to send it to me. So here you have it, Starbucks in Seoul. Okay, let's get started on our corporate strategy. Again, as a review, corporate strategy is different than business strategy insofar as it looks at the types of businesses and industries that the company wants to participate in. So there are basically two types here. You can have a company which is highly diversified. So they are in a lot of different businesses. GE is, and more importantly, I guess you could say, was very, very reliant on acquisition and heavily reliant on vast diversification. So they are more so focusing on industries which are really focused on infrastructure at this point, and they're focusing on Internet of Things and things of this nature, as are many companies. But in the past, they had an incredible array of industries that they were in. They made and sold light bulbs and appliances and turbines and healthcare, insurance, and A number of other, GE Capital was part of the thing in there. So they had really a vast number of seemingly unrelated businesses. About 3M is a sort of a different faction here. They have the diversification process is primarily organic, and they have a number of businesses, but it's clustered in a few related industries. So you see here that we have a kind of two different types of companies and the diversification process and the types of business there. And also the firms can diversify through joint venture opportunities if they so desire. So the joint venture being a, uh, a combined business where different two or more businesses invest in a new business, and they share both the gains and the losses from these new businesses that they get into. Okay, so here we have just an example, a quick example of related versus unrelated diversification. And the unrelated diversification, as you saw, GE and 3M Cargill, who is a privately held company, is another example. And then the related diversification shows you that the business units are operated by the firm. They're highly related, and there are lots of examples. And this is a lot easier to manage, actually, if you are in a business. So automotive, you see that a lot. Consumer packaged goods, the CSD industry, which we talked about, is another example of that, and others. So you see that related diversification is a lot simpler. Okay, so let's look at a couple of very basic examples of forms and scope of diversification. So you can have a geographic diversification, Walmart expanding into Europe, other companies expanding internationally. You can have horizontal diversification from one market segment to another, from one industry to another. And you see that as Coke and Pepsi, and we talked about that when we were together. And then the vertical diversification, you look at that on, the example given here is that Pulte Homes Incorporated created Pulte Mortgage LLC. So it went sort of vertically in terms of its diversification as opposed to horizontally. Now, so the question is, does this create value for the company? Are there revenue enhancement opportunities here? Are there economies of scope here? How does this add value to the company? And the whole idea is that it should be not just additive in terms of 1 + 1 = 2. It should be more like you get with the idea of an acquisition, where you are adding more than just adding more to the company and adding more value to the company than just a specific 1 + 1 = 2 type of thing here. So the the whole idea here is that it's pretty tricky to do, especially if you're looking at highly diversified industries and highly diversified companies, because you have to understand how you're going to get additional value into the company with these different industry additions. Okay, so let's take a quick look here at some examples of product and regional concentrations. Now, I've given you a couple of examples here, again, GE and 3M. These came right out of the 10Ks. So if you really want to get an idea of how the product scope is cut or the regional scope is cut, this is a good way to do it. Now, there are the Securities and Exchange Commission in the US does not demand that different companies, that the companies cut this down very finely, but some companies do. And I think many companies know that this is a good thing to do because it really tells the investment community and the rest of their stakeholders that they have a good handle on what they're doing as a business, and it also gives the investment community a better idea of where the company is going. So these are from 2013, and you can I kept the ones from 2013 because they have a finer level of granularity than some of the ones that were published later on in the 10Ks. So you see the GE product scope here divides it into its different product segments. So power and water, oil and gas, energy management, what have you. The regional scope divides it, excuse me, divides it into its different regional facilities. Some companies will say U.S. and rest of the world. Some companies will provide a finer granularity than U.S., Europe, Pacific Basin, Americas, and Middle East and Africa. And I don't believe that the SEC mandates what the granularity of the regional scope needs to be, but you might find this to be different in different company reportings. So this is what we have here for GE in terms of the 3M product scope. You see they have divided it into 5 different areas: industrial, safety and graphics, electronics and energy, and then healthcare and consumer. And then the regional scope, they have divided it into 4 areas as opposed to the 5 areas that GE has done. So it is it's always interesting to take a look at this and to understand how the companies are dividing their and reporting on their different regional incomes and things. Okay. So let's take a look at this this piece of it. Some firms diversify to create advantage. Here are 3 strategy decisions that companies have to face when they are making either market entry or market exit decisions. And these again, these look like very simplistic questions, but it is something that the company has to ask itself, and something that the company really has to understand in terms of its decisions on which businesses the company should compete in. So which arenas should the company compete in? Which vehicles should it use to enter and exit a business? And what is the economic logic here? And the economic logic, of course, is the bottom line. What does the company need to do to add value to the business and to make profit for the business? And the activities in 2 or more arenas are more than the sum of those benefits alone. That is the really critical piece, because if otherwise, why would you do it? Why would you get into a different business if you could not make sure that the additive value is greater than just adding 1 and 1? Yeah, there's no reason to do that at all. Okay, so how can firms create advantage through corporate diversification? This is always a question, right? Because if you have, like GE, if you're making light bulbs and turbines, how do you create advantage through having this diversified set of businesses? So GE was really good at this, and I say could be, still can, but they were really well known for having a great set of general management skills, and that was very powerful for them going forward. It was very powerful for them in terms of exchanging different competencies across the different lines of business, and it was also very powerful for them in terms of their succession planning, because they had a wide range of very skilled managers that they were bringing up through the succession planning process. And same thing, that leveraging similarities in resources and capabilities that contributed to the competencies and the advantages in each of the businesses. And the learning and know-how, I think that goes along with the management skills, and focusing on the vision of how the firm as a whole will create shareholder value. Now, GE has, to sort of follow this example, GE has been in not such great shape recently, but they were for many years very skilled at doing this, very skilled at creating the shareholder value. Okay, so what do you want to do in terms of evaluating industry attractiveness? You saw that the CSD industry, the carbonated soft drink industry, was very profitable. But you also see that companies like GE, who were highly diversified anyway, were not interested in bringing them into the fold in terms of their industries. So the real decision here is, how attractive are the industries in which the firm has business operations? Obviously, a company like GE or some of the other highly diversified companies did not think it was a good move to get into the carbonated soft drink industry. So the question is, does each industry represent a good market for the firm to be in? Which industries are most attractive? And how appealing is the whole group of the industries overall? And corporate strategists need to take that into account when they are looking at different ways of diversifying and hence promoting growth for the company. Okay, so really sometimes maintaining this competitive advantage can require a shift in the strategic direction of a company. So we have talked about IBM in the past. IBM went through a number of changes and shifts in their corporate strategy. And the answers can change in terms of what business should they be in. So most of us know IBM as a computing company, and they had a number. They've been in business for over 100 years. They had a number of other different technologies that they brought to the market before they got into computers. From the computing perspective, they started out in mainframes, which were very costly. And when they started out, and they were very complicated, very difficult to get them installed, maintained, what have you. They were a lot of them were water cooled, which meant that they had specific physical plant requirements that they had to go through, and they were often in millions of dollars. So for companies and governments also, because governments invested in them very early on, it was a very costly process. It was a very labor-intensive process because they had to have certain skills in place with the people who were maintaining them and such. So this was a very big deal. It was a long sales cycle, and it required some very specific talents on the part of the sales force and also on the part of the people who were installing them and maintaining them to get them in place. So that was going on in the late 50s, mainly in the 60s, 70s, 80s to a point. And in the 80s, 1980s, they transitioned to mid-range computers. This was a big shift as well. because they were selling, the sales force was selling to different people. They were not only selling to the CFO and the upper management of the companies, but they were now more so selling to the departmental level managers. And the mid-range systems were, of course, smaller, and they required a different skill set. They were less expensive, and they had just a different buyer base overall, which meant that the sales force had to be able to sell into a director level or manager level in the corporation. They probably got less of an incentive to sell into that level because the price was lower, and they also had different service requirements because they were the computers were just of a different nature. So they had to bundle service packages which were suitable for departmental level users, and it was just a different thing. Okay, so then, we time passes and we get into PCs. We get into client-server computing and PCs. The PCs, of course, are a lot less expensive. They have a different buyer base. They have a different user base because it was a personal computing system, and they had different skill sets required to sell them, maintain them, what have you. So that was a big shift that the company had to go through. And subsequently, IBM ended up divesting its PC business when China opened up. So it was a transition for them, but it was a good thing for them as well. It was a good opportunity for them to get into China more so, and also a good opportunity for them to uh, divest a piece of the business that they weren't particularly successful at. Okay, so now time passes again, and they get into more computer services. So they got into a lot of outsourcing, disaster recovery, things of that nature. Some of these computer services were exceptionally high cost multi-year contracts. So sometimes in the multi-millions and sometimes in the billions of dollars. And the computer services, of course, had a different sales model and also a different delivery model, of course, and I would say a different buyer base, although the computer services also had to be signed off by a very high level in the organization, in the buyer organization, because of the cost of it and because of the long-range contracts that were usually implied. But the computer services that I'm talking about right now, they had an incredibly long sales cycle. It was months and months and months in order to get through the sales cycle, in order to do the bids, and all this that went along with it. And then they have, in the past few years, they have transitioned more into software. They have done a number of acquisitions, which were focused on more application software. IBM obviously sold software for many years because they had to have the infrastructure software, of course, to run their computers and the networks. So they had a pretty big business going there, but they have in the past, I would say in the past decade plus, they have done a lot of acquisitions in the application area, and that has expanded their business as well. Now, all of these things make vast changes as I mentioned, in the sales cycle, in the expertise of the sales organization, and the expertise of the services organization, and what have you. And all of this is a really big shift for a company to go through, incredibly big. IBM is, I don't know what their exact employee figure is now. I think it's around 300 or 400,000. But when you have to go through this sort of a transition, it is lots of work and um, uh, a lot of transitional activities for the company. So when companies go through this, I gave you this example about IBM, but when companies in general have to go through this sort of a transition, it is pretty significant, and it is a lot of work and really a big shift for everyone in the company because sooner or later it impacts everybody to a certain extent. Okay. So just a moment here on vertical integration. It can be a form of diversification. And basically the vertical integration is to make additions to multiple segments or stages of the value chain. So for example, and here are some basic examples here on the left part of the slide. Years ago, General Motors began operating steel plants. Um, Coke and Pepsi purchased their independent bottling operations. We talked about that. And there are different reasons that companies will choose to diversify through a vertical fashion. And here you see that on the right. They can secure a reliable supply. They can sometimes reduce the total production costs, and they can also, there's a benefit here because they can create value under conditions of low uncertainty. High uncertainty conditions benefit more from positions of flexibility, as you can probably well imagine. So this is a way that companies can diversify. And there are other possibilities for gaining value from diversification and expansion. You can benefit from economies of scope or revenue enhancement synergies. And on the economies of scope, you can benefit, especially if you are in a manufacturing situation, because you can potentially share the manufacturing capacity to reduce the average costs, and that's a great benefit. On revenue enhancement synergies, you can bundle products to appeal to new customers and cross-sell to existing customers. And the cross-selling piece is pretty common, especially when companies make acquisitions. So, for example, I've seen a number of companies in the tech sector who have been potentially selling to really higher end customers, and they will purchase a company, they will acquire a company that has a base which is focused on lower end customers, maybe smaller businesses or potentially consumers. And then they have the opportunity to leverage those products potentially into the accounts which they were focusing on when they were selling to the higher end customers. So there's a nice synergy that can occur there, and it's really can be very, very beneficial to the company. Okay, so how can you use economies of scope to convert this fit into your competitive advantage? You can, for example, brands. Leveraging the brand names and other differentiation sources is a really compelling argument for doing that. The cross-business collaboration and knowledge sharing can always be very, very powerful. I've seen this so many times in the commercial environment, whereby you have you uh, uh, blend different companies together, and you get the benefit of having different areas of expertise brought together and then making a more powerful combination. And that is that can be really great. That can be a really powerful benefit from that. And then combining the related value chain activities to achieve lower costs can be really good as well. So there are lots of positive things about the strategic fit among these areas. Okay, now companies must not um, diversify like this. There are a lot of good reasons to engage in internal development. And you see them here. There are a lot of factors favoring internal development. If you have great in-house skills and resources, this is why not? You know, there is a compelling reason to do it then. If there is if the cost of acquisition is higher than internal entry, why would you bother? If you want to get into the market quickly, yes, you can acquire. But if you have the capability in-house and you have the time and you are not threatened by other competitors in the market directly for the product or service that you are coming out with, you can just do it internally. If you have time enough to develop and launch the business, also good. If you don't have any head-to-head competition in the targeted industry, also good. So there are a lot of good reasons to do it internally if all of these areas fit. And it is, many companies have been quite successful at that. Okay, so let's talk just for a moment about diversification and the value for shareholders. So there are, I provided you with this example here for 3 tests in determining value. So there are the industry's profits and the return on investment as good or better than the present business or businesses. That's the first one. And then the cost of entry. Is the cost of overcoming entry barriers so great as to long delay or reduce the potential for profitability? That is another thing that has to be considered. And then better off, how much synergy will be gained by diversifying into the industry? And the important point here is it needs to be stronger overall performance. It just can't be basically additive. So these are all three pretty important and seem simple, but pretty important tests that companies have to think about when they are considering diversifying. Okay, but however, diversification is not always in the best interest of shareholders. So in terms of risk reduction, the whole idea here is that investors can diversify themselves. They should not rely on a company's diversification strategy to improve their investment portfolio because they can do it themselves, basically. So the whole idea of risk reduction is kind of not really credible here. And in terms of empire building, if CEOs or corporate officials are really interested in just raising their compensation because they have a lot of other businesses that they have to manage, this is not a good reason to do it, and it probably is not going to result in higher shareholder value or margins. And that goes along with the compensation. If the acquisition is motivated by executive pay it is just not, it's not in the best interest of the shareholders. And that is something that one has to think of pretty carefully. Okay, so think about this in terms of the fit along the value chain. There are some really compelling areas here where you could have potential cross business fits across the value chain that could be really helpful and beneficial to the company. So, for example, you could leverage supply chain activities potentially if you can take advantage of that in the different diversified businesses that you're in. You can R&D and technology activities is really, it can be a really compelling argument here. So the for example, if you have a company with some related R&D and technology activities, so maybe you have a large portfolio of somewhat similar but not necessarily completely similar technology related companies. You could really take advantage of the different areas of expertise in terms of leveraging that expertise across projects and across different lines of business. The manufacturing related activities also are, I think pretty much of an obvious good related potential benefit. So if you can leverage the different manufacturing lines, if you can leverage different again different areas of expertise across manufacturing processes, that could be very, very helpful. Now, customer service activities are you have to think about this one very carefully because sometimes the customer service activities can be leveraged, sometimes not. So, for example, you would not have the same customer service personnel in terms of servicing people in a business like Zappos as you would in servicing people who were in the investment area. So you sometimes you can leverage this and sometimes it doesn't work too well. Sales and marketing is the same thing. So for example, if you have a business whereby the sales force is very, very well very well suited for long-term relationship selling. So in other words, the sales force has spent a lot of time developing relationships with the client over months and years, and they are focused on very, very high-end, very costly products or services. You are going to have a very different sales force than if you have a volume-based sales force who is just calling into maybe calling into a call center to fulfill the order or what have you. Very, very different type of skill set, different type of compensation package, what have you. And there are a lot of really good leverage points you can get here, but it's highly dependent upon the situation. Okay, so there are some not very good reasons for pursuing unrelated diversification. So, and we talked a little bit about this previously. Some other areas are, as you see in the yellow blocks, seeking stabilization to avoid cyclical swings in businesses. This is not a good reason to do it. You have to be able to manage your business appropriately, and you can't just do an additive business in the hopes that you will avoid these cyclical swings. Another one is pursuing rapid or contiguous growth for its own sake. That's never a good idea. You should really be very thoughtful about how you add businesses to your portfolio, and what they can do for you and how they can add value, add additive value to the economic stability of the business. And then certainly not pursuing the personal managerial motives, uh, never a good idea, never a good motivation there. Okay, so how many of you are familiar with this particular chart? This is the um, um, known as the BCG matrix, the Boston Consulting Group matrix. How many of you have seen this or used it, either in a course? Katie, okay. Anybody else? This is a pretty common one, actually. All right. So this has been around for some time, and it's again referred to as the BCG matrix. It's often used because it is pretty well known, and it's also a very good graphic on how you can look at the portfolio of products and businesses that you have in your company. So it is, as you see here, the axes of the matrix are industry attractiveness versus the business unit competitive position or the market share. So you see, and it goes from low to high on each of the axes. And what you see here is that starting off with the problem children. Problem children are often products which are they're maybe new to the marketplace. They are taking up a resource, so investment in order to develop and get launched into the marketplace. Their potential for success may be unknown. So the question really is, with the problem children, will additional investment finally turn them into stars, or will additional investment just soak up resource that you should probably be putting somewhere else? And sooner or later, someone has to make the call as to whether or not you will continue to fund the problem children, or you will exit that particular investment opportunity. And this is a very hard thing to do for a number of reasons. Why do you think this is so difficult to do in terms of exiting and making the decision on whether or not the problem child should be continue to be funded, or you should exit the projects? What do you think the issues are here? Did I lose everybody?
Can
Teo,
Professor Murray?
yes, go ahead,
Oh,
please.
it's Xiomara.
Okay, hi.
Hi. Um, I was thinking that maybe you would stop the funding once you've reached a loss that is unrecoverable.
Okay, and how do you determine that?
Um, I think that I guess I'm not sure if there's like a calculation, like an exact calculation for it, but I think I was just thinking in terms of my business, like if the loss is just growing and growing and growing, and I haven't made any profit, then I think I would probably call it quits. But I'm not sure if there's like a number, like a percentage of what you've initially funded hasn't been recovered by a certain amount of time. Maybe you would stop funding it.
Sure. I mean, that's something that you have to decide. That's something that you, as a business manager, have to determine on whether or not it is feasible to continue on that. Okay, good. Thank you. Robert, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I think to me, it's threefold for why problem children are hard to let go. one is it's always hard to say, no, I don't want to do something, compounded by the fact that you're saying, no, I don't want to do something in a highly attractive industry or segment, coupled with the fact that you probably already spent a lot of money on the project. So now you've got sunk costs that you'd really like to get your money back on, but if you choose not to continue, then you're going to lose that completely. And then three is just, it's saying, hey, I'm giving up. People don't like to say, I can't figure out this challenge. So it's, in a way, accepting defeat.
Yeah, people don't like to give up, right? Yeah. No, I get that. Okay, thank you. Katie, did you have something?
I was going to say the same thing about it's kind of hard to let go of such the high growth rate opportunity. Thinking, maybe if we just tweak this or maybe we just do that, and then it'll be a different outcome. So that typically happens.
Yeah, that's really difficult. And okay, so in order to get a product to market, you usually have to have an executive sponsor, and the executive sponsor has to be a big believer in the opportunity for this product. And it is usually pretty difficult for them to let go of that, because they are probably personally invested in it, I guess you could say, and it's tough to exit that. And the other thing too is, depending on where you are in the continuum, there are other people involved as well. So I had to once sunset a product prematurely when it was in field test. So the people who were in field test with it had bought into it, and all of the engineers, obviously, who were working on it had bought into it. And there were other related people in the company who had bought into it. And for you to have to come through and say, we're no longer going to put any resource into this, and we're going to exit this particular initiative, is really hard on the people who are involved. And it's a tough thing to do. It's a really difficult thing to do. And it's an unenviable position to be in, believe me. So it is, that's, it's tough, it's difficult. Jennifer, go ahead, please.
Now, isn't this also why sometimes outside sources are hired to actually do that? So that way the personal attachment isn't taken into account, because they don't have that attachment but they're strictly doing it based on the financials?
Yes. Also, because they don't have any skin in the game, really. They're hired to come in, do something, and leave. They don't have to face people in the morning. They don't have they don't have to stay around and do some other do some other cleanup that's involved with it. And it is just, it's simpler that way. It's not any nicer for the people involved, but it's simpler that way. Seriously. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so that is the problem child. Now we go to the dogs. The dogs need to go. The dogs are products or services that are taking up resource, that are not making a lot of money, that just really need to be exited from the portfolio. So dogs are pretty obvious. Now the cash cows are something else. The cash cows, you don't want to kill the cash cows by any stretch of the imagination. Now the cash cows are usually older products that are generating a reasonable amount of revenue. So they could be some products that have been in the market for a while that are generating a lot of revenue through maintenance streams or what have you. And they can then feed the stars or the problem children, because they are getting, there's a nice revenue stream coming in, a lot of cash, and you don't want to kill the cash cows at all. And then there are the stars, who could have been problem children, but these are the ones that have a higher market share, they have a good competitive position, and they are bringing a lot of revenue into the company. So the stars are clearly ones that you want to hang on to. So this is the basic part of the matrix. Now, I would say to you, if you are going to use this in a company situation, you need to understand what is behind the numbers that are behind your reasoning for putting different products or product lines into the different quadrants in these matrices. So, for example, someone will ask you, you will absolutely have to know what the revenue projections are behind these, what the current revenue is behind these, and where they are positioned in terms of the industry, because you will get these questions without, you know, without question, you will get these questions. And so you need to understand what's backing up your positioning of these different products and services within the matrix. Very important. You don't want to be embarrassed in front of the CEO. So, okay. Anybody else have anything on this? If not, we'll move on. Okay, so we are up to our case. Why don't we, let's see, we're approaching the top of the hour. Why don't we take a short break, come back at the very top of the hour, and then we will pursue our House of Tata discussion. And following that, I will, you know, take any questions or what have you on the presentations or upcoming cases. So I will thank you, and I will see you back at the top of the hour. Thanks. All right, everyone, welcome back. At this point, we can start our discussion on House of Tata in 1995, The Next Generation. And I really like this case. It's an older case, but I really like it because usually when you have cases on highly diversified organizations, they are often US based, or at least based in the West. And this gives you a different view of what it was like for an organization in India to look at these issues surrounding the different challenges with highly diversified businesses. And also they were doing it at a time where it was very, very difficult to make the transition due to the fact that the organization was in a country and was based in a country that was not didn't have a well-developed commercial situation. They didn't have a lot of experience vis-a-vis, you know, versus some of the other Western companies. They didn't have a lot of experience in the development of a commercial environment. So it was very challenging. And Ratan Tata had a number of initiatives that he was trying to pursue. So what was the situation there? What was the situation in the country which made it so challenging for Ratan to try to move these initiatives forward? What was going on? Vinya, go ahead, please.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're a little bit faint.
How about now?
Better.
Okay, perfect. I think this was a really interesting case, partially because I was born in India, so Tata to me was probably like the Apple of the States, right? Like everyone knows what Apple is. Basically, the same thing in India. Like everyone knows of Tata, right? Even if they haven't used their services in one way or another, everyone sort of prefers the company. But one of the unique things I actually learned reading this case was a lot of the history of the company, even though I'm aware of like how it's positioned itself in the marketplace today. But I thought it was really interesting that, I mean, back in the day when Tata was starting, the whole government in India was very regulated in the sense that they had major control of all different industries across the board, right? So it was all based upon licenses. So you had to go get a license from the government to be able to operate in that industry. And I think that Tata was coming up at a time where that was the case. But when they started deregulating the government in terms of giving it back to the marketplace and letting kind of industries operate independently, the things that came into question was kind of how corrupt the government was. And that was a case where a lot of people were paying off officials to kind of try and get a better license or get a better bidder, even if there was the highest bidder, the lowest bidder was paying them off to redo the bids. Things like that was pretty like prevalent. And so when Tata came into place, they kind of started doing like a family-owned like business, essentially, is how they started off. And so when the government was moving towards deregulating the license type schemes to going into like a more marketplace economy, one of the big economies that it started deregulating was steel. And Tata was a big player in the steel industry, and they started kind of getting their roots there and expanding to kind of a part of what they were today. But that's a little bit of the history of Tata. I don't know if you wanted me to keep going, but I wouldn't give other people a chance as well. But I just wanted to go over the case and kind of my experience with it.
Okay, great. No, thank you for giving us that color and that context on it. Thank you. Okay, Rizwan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on that, I mean, this is happening at a time when the Indian government is making a lot of changes, right? In the consumer market space, there's liberalization of the economy, which is opening up, the traditional closed markets to foreign investment. So this is causing a lot of threat to the internal companies such as Tata, which are under pressure because there are multinational firms that can come in and take over some of the core business streams that Tata is involved. Also, Ratan is coming into a consortium of companies that have a cultural operating model, which is kind of dysfunctional. It's not centrally managed. JRD, who was the father of Ratan, he basically was a hands-off CEO, and it was more informal, for lack of words. Ratan is facing many challenges in this case study, as we noticed. He has got some pressures to grow the business, to bring some synergies in the company. And obviously, people are leveraging Tata brand across this consortium of business units, which he's not getting any royalty or benefit out of, right? And there's some more issues going on in this case study as well. So he comes up with different ideas how to generate capital for new investments, right?
Yep.
And also to have a partnership program with international players to sort of branch off and grow the Tata brand going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned this branching out piece, and I assume that you were referring to the Jardin Group idea. Yeah. So what was the situation there? I mean, why was there so much resistance to this type of a thing?
I think the concept was he was branching off into other places, but at the same time there was some resistance by the cultural part of this too, because companies were thinking that it's going to take away their jobs. The airline part, when he was trying to partner with Singapore Airlines, had some resistance by the Indian government because that was a nationally regulated industries, right?
Yes.
So those are some of the factors that he was facing in those international ventures. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, and the whole thing was that this, excuse me, this opening up of the commercial environment to international investors was new, and it wasn't really completely well received basically, well, I think in part because it was just new, and there was a lot of hesitancy on the part of people because they thought they would be taken advantage of, or whatever it was. So there was a lot of hesitation, a lot of really kind of dysfunctional
Yeah.
attitudes toward it. Yeah. So that was a tough thing for him to combat. Okay, great. Thank you. Sean, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just, thinking about all of the resistance that there was to, foreign investment, and the fact that this is such a family branded group of companies. That was a lot of the resistance that was coming against some of the things that they were trying to do, was just sort of social resistance to the idea that they wanted to make these joint ventures with outside investors.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the company was more than 100 years established at that point, right? So the the whole idea that some foreigners were coming in and and participating in the company and participating in the decision making of the company was really not well received. It was it was uncomfortable for people, I guess you could say. And it was, since they had so many employees, and since it was such a long-standing organization, this was difficult for everyone to swallow, really. So, okay, good, thank you. Teo, go ahead, please.
Yes, I think there was some resistance because the group was made up of a bunch of companies, and they had like two major flagship companies that made almost half of the revenue. So I believe Cisco and Telco, they were mostly against the unification, and the other smaller companies were all for it.
Yeah, exactly. So they had a very, it was kind of an interesting group of companies, because some of them had pretty enormous revenues, some had very very small revenues. So it was, and they were highly diversified. So it was, in any scenario, it was very difficult to manage a group of companies like that. And most of the time, the upper management really had a hands-off process here, in terms of telling the people, telling the managers of the company and the heads of the companies what to do. They had a lot of leeway in terms of the decisions that they made, and they had their own, they made their own decisions. So anything that came in that cramped that was a really a difficult thing for the managers of the companies to swallow and to deal with. So it was very tenuous, at least, I guess you could say, very tenuous. All right, thank you. Kiba, go ahead, please.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I was going to say, not too much different from what everyone said, but I think when you think about the history of the company, the nationalization that they went through, the advantages that they were trying to give foreign investors to come in, there was a lot of animosity that was created by the political climate and by the government. So when you take those geopolitical factors along with the socioeconomic environment, and you combine them with the complexities of what JRD put in place, Ratan had a heck of a task, because he was classically trained in America, and he probably had a lot of thought process around that. Even though he went back to India in like 62 and he was going through the companies, when you're trying to take away the independence, it's very difficult, because they were trained to be entrepreneurial. They were trained to be independent. And that's what actually helped them to flourish and actually become the productive entities they were. I think the problem is that they had like 84 companies and only 8 of them were producing most of the revenue. So his idea of divesting or trying to get brand recognition was important, but I just think that there was a different way to go about it in terms of getting buy-in instead of implementing rules around mandatory retirement ages or trying to rotate people out. There was a different way to go about it in terms of the cultural aspect of it and actually getting to what his goal was, which was increasing the brand equity so they wouldn't be susceptible to hostile takeovers and that they could grow the brand. I think there was a lot of complexity in there, but I don't want to go any further without anyone else coming in.
Well, I was going to say, what do you think he should have done as opposed to enforcing the retirement age and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it from a strategic perspective, I think what he should have done is come in and said, hey, from 84 different, unrelated diversified industries, here's where our main source of revenue are. So let's take a look at the industries that we have, to your point earlier about the slide, which ones are the dogs, which ones are the cash cows. Let's diversify and identify them that way. And then we're going to focus on those industries that we can grow and we can get exponential growth out of those. The ones that we need to let go of, we need to let go of those. But he should make it more of an inclusive effort as opposed to mandating, because all these people operated independently for so long, and that's what helped them to grow. So when you start trying to reel in people to take away their independence, that might have an adverse impact on the business overall. Like there was an article, an HBR article about don't or partner with your acquisitions, don't integrate them, right? He needs to learn how to be a better partner as opposed to trying to integrate them.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's an interesting perspective, because he did really take some measures that were clearly unpopular, and it was I believe that he felt that he had to, because he had to get some sort of structure in there, but certainly it wasn't well received, in particular by the older management, the older long-term management in the company. Okay, good. So what were the big initiatives that he wanted to put in place, that Ratan wanted to put in place? There were 3 major ones. Gina, go ahead, please.
He wanted to implement a fee structure, whereas the companies under the umbrella would pay a fee to be affiliated or use the Tata name. And he was going to do this whole branding and advertising thing to add value to the companies in the umbrella. He was also going to revitalize the management development program and diversify into new industries. And then he also wanted to, going back to the Hong Kong company, wanted to bring them in and give them a 20% equity stake in Tata.
Right, exactly. So he had a lot of initiatives, both internal and external, to the company that he wanted to implement. So about the branding piece of it, and the advertising, and this fee structure that was associated with this, do you think that was a good idea? And you can answer, somebody else can answer, that's okay. I put it out to the group.
I can answer if
okay, go ahead.
I think for some of the companies it was a good idea, for others it was not a good idea. So I think that just goes back to being clear as far as the messaging for each business, because each of them need to be treated in a different way, and it couldn't just be a blanket treatment or blanket branding, because that would hurt some of the companies, but it would boost others.
Okay, so what do you think that who do you think would suffer from this? What companies? They had a lot of companies of all shapes and sizes and a lot of different industries. Who do you think would suffer from this this branding scheme? Robina, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if any companies would per se be at a detriment. I think what this would do is serve as more of a strategic way of looking at, can this branding and marketing help a few companies? And if it can't, are those the ones that should then be considered for sort of sunset? I think this initiative could serve as more of a strategic movement to see what needs to be cleaned out of the portfolio.
Okay, interesting, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole idea behind this, of course, was to create this brand that would allow them to get more of eventually an international presence, and get more of sort of be able to better compete globally than they could at the moment, because they had so many different smaller businesses, and then they had as everyone pointed out, they had a few large ones that were bringing in most of the revenue. So I think that was the emphasis behind the whole thing. And some of the companies were just pretty unhappy with the whole scheme. And the idea that was interesting to me is that they were excuse me, this whole branding idea was not even going to be completely funded through the little tax that they were putting on the companies. I mean, they were going to uh, uh, the company overall would have to kind of supplement the excuse me, the costs that were associated with the branding scheme. So it was it was kind of an interesting scenario there. Okay, thank you. Jennifer, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to also say that after I read this case, I also found another one. It was the House of Tata acquiring a global footprint. That one also went in how they ended up, once they restructured per se, they started focusing more on like the hotels and the steel and the auto industry. And then it's talked more how they started like consolidating per se.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I just wanted to point that out if anybody else was interested, because it sort of went off of this case and then it further explained it even more, how they were more on consolidating, but then getting a stronger global footprint within the tea industry as well.
Yep. Okay, good. Thank you. All right, Allison, go ahead, please.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I think when we talk about the Tata brand, to build off of what Gina was saying, is when I look at Exhibit 3 and it reviews all the different industries, I think when you look at some of the areas where they had multiple holdings in an industry, bringing those individual companies together, within that brand would be tremendously important and strong, because they're, instead of having them be separate entities and, doing their own thing as they had done in the past with more of a group control or like with group branding, it's going to allow them to work together into separate markets, because they each bring something, like from an R&D perspective or focus to the table to help one another out, to also like decrease competition, which then, if you map that out the right way, it can actually help the group, the brand as a whole. And I don't think you'd have to really assess that by industry where they have multiple companies, but I think that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because this is all about resource allocation, and then also the whole branding thing that they wanted to institute and then solidify, and doing something like what you just suggested would be a good move on that. Okay, great, thank you. Sean, did you have something else?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so good discussion there. I mean, they were again, they were incredibly diversified, and they needed to do something to position them to be in a better competitive arena globally, and these are some of the measures that they took to try to do that. So they were another thing that Gina mentioned is that they were trying to bring up their management development program. And it was it was interesting to learn that they were kind of under the top of the market when it came to the salary structure. And they needed to take some measures to correct that. And also they needed to put in a better succession planning um, process, I guess you could say. So I think that was a really positive move on their part, because they had to build a good workforce, and they had to build a workforce which was really well versed in the overall company. And a good succession planning organization, or a good succession planning process will do that. I don't know if I don't know how many of you work for companies or have worked for companies that have good succession planning processes in place, but it can be very powerful. Ahmed, go ahead, please.
Yes, you asked who might suffer. I think shareholders might suffer in a short run, uh, given that they've been resisting, assuming that there's no direct benefit for them with this branding scheme. I definitely I agree with that in a short run basis, because it would definitely reduce their return in the early years. But once they build a strong brand, or once they have built that strong brand they're planning for, then the return will increase.
Yeah, of course, and nothing comes for free, really. I mean, you have to understand what your investment exposure is, and you have to understand what the overall return period is on that. And again, it wasn't like they were it wasn't like it was a money-making scheme on the part of the overall management. They were not even covering their costs for this, but it was more of a longer term branding and hopefully revenue generation period that the company could go into. So it was a bold move, I think, by Ratan to try to put that into place, because obviously it wasn't completely embraced by the people in the company. So we talked about the branding and the advertising. We talked a little bit about the management development program, and let's talk a little bit more about Jardine and what they believe they could benefit from by having Jardine buy into the company. So what was the overall benefit that you could see from this whole Jardine arrangement? Kiba, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the overall benefit to me was equity.
Turn right onto Kool-Aid Road.
They needed more equity. They needed cash, and this gave them flexibility, and they needed deep pockets for what Ratan wanted to do. So this gave them an equity partner. This gave them a cash stake in investment in the company, and it gave them more liquidity and flexibility to pursue whatever plans
turn right.
he actually wanted to execute against. So that's why I think he was pursuing the equity stake.
Okay, great. Thank you. Katie, go ahead, please.
Hi. Yeah, I was going to say something similar. They were really excited about the capital, so they could use it for venture startups. And then they also contribute a wider range of like expertise for different business activities. I think they mentioned like retailing and distribution, real estate, things like that. So just being able to kind of knowledge share was a big thing for them as well.
Yeah, exactly. They wanted somebody with some international experience who could contribute to the overall management of the organization. So between that and the capital, that was a, it was kind of it was a reasonably powerful combination. So that was a good thing. Okay, great. Kiba, did you have something else, or was your hand up from before?
I just forgot to put my hand down.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Yeah, so that was, it was all good. It was all positive. And the really bold thing about this was that Ratan tried to do all three of these things at once, because these are all big changes. And by trying to put these into position at more or less the same time was a pretty big initiative. And it was also, again, a very bold thing to do, especially given that he was not new to the business, but he was certainly, at least chronologically, less senior than a lot of the people who were running the different businesses. And he had clearly not made any friends by putting into effect the age restrictions and some of the other things that he put into effect when he took over. So it was a pretty tough situation there. But the whole idea here is that it was a really amazing time if you think about what was going on in India at that time, and perhaps some of you were there and saw it then. I can't speak for that, but if you look at the Indian economy, if you look at Exhibit 1 in the case, which is pretty telling, it looks at the Indian economy in 1995 as compared to the economy of the US and the UK. And if you look at some of the indicators, in particular the capital market indicators and also the information and infrastructure indicators, the level of development of the economy was nowhere near some of the Western economies. So if you look at, for example, phone lines in use per 1,000 of the population. In India, 11. In the UK, 494. In the US, 599. If you look at the one below that on the TVs per 1,000, 40 in India, 439 in the UK, 817 in the US. This is again per 1,000 of the population. So it was, the whole economy was compared to the Western economies. And somebody brought up the fact that Ratan had been in the US for a while studying. So he had clearly a different view of the world. But if you compare those statistics, it's pretty staggering. And you can just get an idea of what the commercial environment was like, in addition to what the cases told us about the commercial environment. So a lot of these statistics are really pretty interesting. And if you look at the also if you look at the capital market statistics, those are also very pretty telling as well. And I know a lot of you are in finance, so I'm going to leave that for you to comment on as opposed to me. But it was, it was a big change. I mean, I think that you know, I try to bring myself back to reality every time I read a case like this by understanding that a lot of us live outside of a major metropolitan area in the Western world, and it is the rest of the world is not necessarily like that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into international strategy. But it must have been just an incredible feat for Ratan to pull this off when he did. And he was, you know, he was just an amazing guy. So I hope you enjoyed the case. He had clearly a lot of challenges on his hands. He, you know, he was running. He ran the company for you know, many years, and he was clearly very successful at it. If you think about, you know, Tata is pretty much of a household uh, recognized name, I guess you could say. And they are in Jen, I think it was you who were saying that they were you saw the case follow up on what they were doing with steel, automobiles. They have you know, they have a huge consultancy. There you know, lots and lots of stuff going on there. So what he did had to have been pretty impactful and pretty successful if you think about it going forward. So what else impressed you about the case? Or the circumstances that were going on? Gina, go ahead, please.
Toward the end, it just talks about one of the comments from the associates kind of indicated that Ratan was a great thinker and a strategist, but maybe not as agile in his approach. And so I was just thinking that because Ratan had all these ideas and he wanted to do all these things, he recognized that he needed a partner who could fill in the areas that he was lacking, and understanding what it took to get to where he wanted to be. And so I think that his thought about who he could partner with, you know, was very strategic.
Mm-hmm. So you meant the guys from Jordan, or?
Yeah. So an associate from there was saying that he's he's thoughtful and strategic, but not as agile in thinking about things like, you know, more minute details like customers and things like that. So he's more of a big thinker and maybe not as good with the details, and his customer choice changes and, you know, things change. His thoughts may be lagging where he needed a partner who could drill down on those details and change with the customer needs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, good. Yeah, he's often characterized as being a very private person and a very you know, not a flamboyant personality. So I expect that he you know, he knew his I expect that he knew his strengths and also his limitations, and he probably made that choice with Jordan based on that, as you indicated. So that was it was pretty good. It was pretty interesting. Okay, Rizwan, go ahead, please.
I think most of the points are covered. I think there are two things. I mean, I would compare Tata to the Samsungs of India, right? They're into multiple segments of the business segments, right? From automobiles to electronics to healthcare. Tata did launch an airline service, by the way, in India now, and it's called Vistara, which has been in production for almost 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the case study, I think there are a couple of things that I highlighted in my response, but I think he should also look into consolidation of certain businesses that are running, which are doing similar products, such as cement and agricultural products, because it seems like he's spread too much. And then also divest some industries that were having negative net worth, right? Which were like, I think, construction and rolling mills kind of industries that he had. So that would help him sort of save costs and generate more revenue from other places. And the third thing, yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Third thing was the Tata Administrative Services was a brilliant idea. And one recommendation would be to kind of leverage that as another business unit to offer professional and consulting services as he ventures out into the emerging international markets, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective because I don't know, maybe they did. Maybe they
They did
maybe
actually eventually.
yeah, they took the learning from that
Yeah.
and launched their consulting business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Ricky, go ahead, please.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a little bit faint.
Oh, let me get closer. I thought it was interesting. It just seemed like a throwaway line in the case study about Ratan's relationship with the prime minister, and the relationship they were able to, get approved, a bunch of projects. And I just wonder how things would have been different if, maybe that relationship wasn't there.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, all right. If you consider the fact that the company has been around for so many years and has established, this foundation and, et cetera, it is not surprising that he had a relationship with the prime minister. But given the transition that the government was going through and the government and the commercial environment was going through, it probably didn't hurt at all for him to have this relationship and this close personal association with the prime minister. Yeah. So good observation. Okay. Thank you. Robert, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so in terms of, to me, one of the most striking things about this case is how much influence Ratan was able to garner on all these operating companies when his actual formal, like in terms of the stake that his holding company has in them, is so small. He's not even the largest. The Tata family is not even the largest stakeholder in the holding company itself.
Right.
So I thought that was fascinating for him to exert his will that way, and for all these companies to fall in line. And then the other thing is for their 7 major companies, and this has been talked about before about how effective they are. But when you look at their performance versus industry in terms of their stock and what they're returning to their shareholders, it is most of them, with the exception of like ACC, is well above industry average and really impressive. Even though it had talked about how Telco and I think Tisco had a rocky patch. I mean, it's clear the stock, he was doing his job for the shareholders.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks for bringing that up because it was some of the companies weren't doing as well, but overall it was pretty impressive. The performance was pretty impressive. So it was it was a great thing. Somebody was doing something right there in terms of managing the companies. Okay, thank you. Rizwan, go ahead, please.
Oh, I think I may have it from my last time. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem. Ahmed, did you have something more?
Yes, I just had a one issue with the airline business because when Ratan was doing his restructuring, he was selling loss-making companies, or at least that was his intention, and focusing more on market position rather than opportunities. And now he's contradicting himself by getting himself in a huge business with no experience whatsoever. So this ticked me off because if he want to do his strategy, he has to be consistent, I would say.
Okay, so I thought that they had some previous experience in the airline business, but it was lots and lots of years ago. But in any case, yeah, it was a kind of a long haul for them to try to get involved in that, and it was it was years and years and years, and it was not completely successful. So that was tough, and it's interesting to your point because he he could have, I'm sure that he could have done something easier than get involved in the airline business. And if you remember, Porter and his his comments on the airline business, it's not a great business to be in. But in any case, I am not quite sure what the motivation was. I'm not quite sure if it was because he thought the country needed it, and he was doing something, purposeful for the country, or if he thought that there was maybe some long-term growth possible there, or what. I'm not sure what it was, but it was a tough battle for sure to look at that. Okay, thank you. Kiba, go ahead, please.
Yeah, along the airline industry, didn't JRD, they nationalized Tata's airline and split it into 2 airlines. So what was the motivation to go back into that? I mean, it seemed like there was already an existing industry and it was formerly owned by them. To go back into it in such a low margin business, was it just maybe a pride thing maybe? I don't think there was a real need for it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the cases don't tell you everything. So there are, there could have been some other motive that was going on there. Could have been that again, that they felt that the country needed it. They could have been, they thought it was a longer term business opportunity. They could have had some other intelligence that said somebody else wanted to get in there and take advantage of the opportunity. I don't know. I don't know what it was. No. So, okay. All right, everyone. Very good. We've had a good discussion on House of Tata. Does anyone have any other questions that I can answer at the moment? We have a few minutes left. Teo, go ahead, please.
Yes, ma'am. I have a question about the feedback. Are we just getting a letter grade, or you would like give us like feedback on things we should have worked on?
Oh, on the cases?
Yes.
The cases. Okay, here's what happens. When you submit the case study, I will review it, and I will send you and your partner an email message giving some feedback on it. And in that email message, there will be a number grade. So 85, 90, 95, whatever it is. And that's kind of how I do it. I don't put it in Canvas, but I will send it in email. And that's one of the reasons that I published the grading scale. So you all would get a good view of what that actually translated to in terms of the letter grade.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Okay. Well, we have a few minutes remaining, so you can use this time to do whatever, do some reading, do some other work with your teams, whatever you choose. And I would like to again thank you all for your participation in the weekend, and also for your participation today. And I wish you a good rest of the week and a good weekend. And I will look forward to meeting you again on the web conference next Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.